All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. And then now that post impressionism is now old, what's the new? Right? What's next? What's next after post impressionism? Yeah, that's it. Let's go. Right. So we're going to go over to Europe, and then we're going to look at Fauvism. Fauvism is the avant garde that replaces post impressionism. I'm so glad you asked. What does it mean? We'll get to that story in a minute. All right. So if you look at that, I given you four examples of Fauvism up there. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Yeah, it's color, right? The bold, bright colors. I heard Gauguin and Van Gogh because they're using those bright colors as well. This is the first movement of the 20th century. All right, so I was talking about the art movements lasting for hundreds of years, and then they were lasting 50 years, then 30, then 20. This one source that I have says it lasted from 1905 to 1908. And then another source I have says it lasted from 1904 to 1910. So between 3 and 6 years, this art lasted. So why are we studying it? Why, because it's such a tiny little blip in the history of art. We're studying it because it's important. It influences other artists. The Fauvists had only 3 exhibitions. They used a firework of colors in their works of art. They painted mostly scenes of everyday life. It's genre art, is what we're looking at. They embraced wild color juxtapositions. These paintings don't tell stories, they're not symbolic of anything else, but they emphasize mood and emotion. Here is a Fauvist talking about color. He says, color was not given to us so that we could imitate nature. It was given to us so we could express our emotions. He's right. Yeah, right? This is a logical progression from the post impressionists. In fact, I have a couple of Gauguin paintings there on the left. And you can see with just a little bit more color, these are basically Gauguins. But the Fauvists were not a cohesive movement. Each artist is kind of doing their own thing. What they did was influential, though. They extended the bounds of representation, and they are pushing the bounds of what is capable. They're moving closer to pure abstraction. All right, so I made this little cartoon of Gauguin and the post-impressionists. So like Gauguin and post-impressionists, they're saying, hey, check us out. We make colorful art. And then the Fauvists say, yeah, I can dig it. We'll take that colorful art and make it with brighter colors. And Gauguin says, but it's already brightly colored. And the Fauvists say, is it really though? All right, so here are 3 artists that I'm going to introduce you to. All right, so how did the Fauves get their name? So here's the story of how they got their name. Their artwork was on display in a gallery. So it was a room with paintings on the wall. The paintings were all like Fauvis paintings. They hadn't been called that yet, though. It was just a bunch of new artists with very bright color paintings. There was a Donatello sculpture in the middle of the room. Then in comes this guy right here. He's an art critic. His name is pronounced Louis Vaucel. And he writes about the show. And he says in his critique, he calls it Donatello parmi les fauves, which means Donatello among the wild beasts. So Fauvism or fauves means wild beasts. And I bet that's going to be a question on the test. And the artists like it, so the name stuck. I do want to talk a little bit about optical color versus arbitrary color. Look at the dates of these 2 paintings. One was painted in 1900, one was painted in 1905, just 5 years apart from each other. And I want you to see that at the same time, we have artists that are still painting in the traditional style, but these new artists are painting with a very different ideas in their artwork. Optical color means true color. It means the color that you see with your eyes. Arbitrary color means it's imaginative color. It's emotional color. It's unreal. Look at the colors in her face. That's not real. All right, this gives you a sense of the size of these artworks, and we'll take a look at this one right here. Look at the dense, vibrant brushwork on this painting. Have you? Yes, right. It's or also, do you see another artist in this? Like, do you remember that pointillism? All right, he's painting with the dots. That's Seurat. Yeah. So he was definitely influenced by Seurat. In fact, he wrote about Seurat. So the colors attract the viewer's attention as much as the subject does. And he doesn't use light and dark to paint. He doesn't use light and dark paints to indicate light and shadow. Instead, he uses color to indicate light and shadow. And the brighter the color, the more divorced it is from reality. The more a viewer will interpret it and have an emotional response to it. Here's another one by Andre Derain. Look at the red beach along the river right here. And then the blue bridge. And then the green city in the background. These are definitely arbitrary colors. All right, I want you to know where Lestock is. It's in the south of France. What other artist was working in the south of France? Van Gogh was working in the south of France. And then one more artist that we were looking at. No. There's a mountain over here somewhere. Yeah, Cezanne. All right, so Lestock is this little area right down here. It's on the coast. And here's is Lestock. We have a photograph of it, and then we have a Cezanne painting of it. So this is Andre Derain's version of Lestock. By the way, guess where this painting is? No, guess where the location of this artwork is.
A museum.
It's in a museum, yes. Yeah, it's here in Houston.
Oh.
Yeah. And if you Google Fauvism, this will be the #1 painting that comes up. This is one of those, like we actually have an iconic artwork here in Houston. The Museum of Fine Arts. Let's take a look at this. Derain's version of Lestock is very different from the other artists' paintings of the location. It is not a pure landscape, and instead it includes depictions of people. Or instead of using light and dark to show shadows and highlights, he's using colors. It is difficult to tell where the shadows and highlights are. The Fauves used a juxtaposition of complementary colors to capture the difference between light and shade. It is these bright colors that are intended to show volume and depth. Our second artist is Maurice de Vlaminck. This painting right here, it's set in a tourist town in France, and this is during off season. So the tourist season is when everybody comes to visit. But if it's a tourist town way up in the north, nobody wants to go there. In the winter. So it has this like kind of a lonely feel where it has that one solitary figure that's surrounded by the empty space. But look at how bold the brushstrokes are. Have you seen brushstrokes like that before? Have you seen brushstrokes like this before? Which artist used brushstrokes like this? Cezanne. Remember that Cezanne had those very squarish kind of, yeah. It is Van Gogh. Remember that these guys are rejecting the traditional painting of the time. They're rejected, just like the Impressionists did. They rejected traditional themes. There's no mythology in Fauvism. There's no history. The Impressionists celebrated leisure culture, but Vlaminck does not. Again, we have that solitary figure there that's working all by himself. I do want you to notice these two trees right here that frame the composition to help keep our wandering eyes from going off onto the outside of the artwork. But it's Van Gogh that he is imitating in his brushwork. Now, later in life, Vlaminck spoke out against modern art. He spoke out against Picasso, and this made him unpopular in the art world. But the irony is that this is the first, like he's one of the first modern artists. And then later on, he speaks out against it. Here's a couple of his other paintings. All right. Yeah, wow, bright colors, bright colors. All right, we're going to move on to Henri Matisse. Our final artist for Fauvism is Henri Matisse. And I want to introduce you to this painting right here, Bonheur de Vivre, or The Joy of Life. And these photographs right here give you a sense of the size of the artwork. Here you can see somebody proposing to his fiancée, his girlfriend, in front of the painting. Everybody say, "Aw." And then on the other photograph, you can see them working on restoring the painting. So that gives you another sense of the size of the artwork. It's a rather large one. Okay, so here's our painting. We have such bright colors in this one. In fact, there's like a path that kind of winds its way down this space that we have here. It's almost like there's an attempt to show space that goes back into space, but because the colors are flat and because the colors are bright, it's flat in that space. So it's showing deep space and flat space at the same time. All right, and in this painting we have musicians and figures, and we have an amorous couple in the lower right. I want you to know this term, Arcadian landscape. If you might be wondering what is an Arcadian landscape, this is an Arcadian landscape. It's a beautiful landscape, but what makes this different about other landscapes? Because I have introduced the idea of landscapes to you before, but what makes this one a little bit different than, say, like a normal landscape? You see the people in the lower left? These Arcadian landscapes have a little bit of mythology to them. The imagery of Arcadian landscapes dates back to antiquity. In Greek mythology, Arcadia was an earthly paradise inhabited by gods and nymphs. And Arcadia is also a lost state of innocence. Arcadian landscapes have been popular since the Renaissance, but there's a resurgence of popularity here in the 20th century, at the turn of the 20th century. Arcadian landscapes would typically have flute players in them, and then so Matisse includes flute players in his painting. Arcadian landscapes would have pairs of lovers in their paintings, and so Matisse includes pairs of lovers. But what we're looking at is an unspoiled landscape. There's no evidence of modernity, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the early 20th century that makes paintings like this popular, and the reference to Arcadia popular. I've talked about the Industrial Revolution and the effect that it has on cities. Before zoning laws, before people figured out that, hey, having a lot of factories in the middle of downtown is a bad thing, then they started building factories out on the part of town where nobody cares. But living in the city was a rough experience. Lots of pollution, not just air pollution from the factories, but also water pollution, and there's also pollution on the ground. And it was a very noisy, very congested place. And so people were getting sick of living in the cities, or having a tough time of living in the cities. And so they were attracted to images like this that shows people in harmony with nature, lying in the grass without a care in the world, and being very comfortable and relaxed with each other. The painting celebrates sensuality and the pleasures of the body, and it celebrates the freedom in nature. It's showing us a time when pleasures were simple and expressed through the body. The popularity of Arcadian landscapes of the 20th century is a reaction to modern life and industrialization. And people are longing for a time that is pre-modern. This painting shows no stresses of modern life, when the body was in harmony with nature. And these people are purified of any of their imperfections. A couple things I want to point out. Notice the hair on these two ladies. We have orange hair and blue hair. Those are complementary colors to each other. Notice the outlines of them. The outline on the top is green. The outline on the bottom is red. That is also complementary colors. So the artist is definitely versed in color theory. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the scale on this, and then this lack of space. If you look at the figures that are in the middle ground, right here in the middle ground, and then the figures that are in the foreground, they're on the same scale. They're the same size, and it shouldn't be like that. As people go back into the distance, they should get smaller in size. In fact, these two ladies right here should be a lot smaller, and these people over here should be smaller even still. So he has ignored the rules of perspective and proportion. Yes. What's on what? In the lower right hand corner? Yeah, right. Right. It looks like two people with one head. Does it? All right. So here is what I think is a head, but I don't know whose head belongs with what body. It's weird. It's really strange what's going on in the lower right. And if you look at, like, yes, this looks like an amorous couple, like probably like they're kissing, right? But that isn't that a strange pose to be in? Wouldn't that be the most uncomfortable kiss ever? All right, it's strange. That's it, right. I imagine that this is one of her arms wrapping around his neck, because if I maybe it's two girls, but like because there's no way to determine. Right. Yeah, so it's lucky that we have a piece of cloth across that to cover that up. Yeah, it's strange. I've always been puzzled by the lower right hand corner of this painting. Yes, right. So here's one breast, there's another breast, there's a belly button, and then her crotch would be right here. And then so where's her head? And if it's his head, yeah, if it's his head, it looks like the head is facing backwards as well. I don't understand it. But that it helps with, like, it helps make it flatter even, because it's difficult for me to figure out how these two three-dimensional bodies are intertwined with each other. But if it's flat shapes, if you cut like an outline of a person into a flat shape, you can bend them and slide them in and out in any way that but it in any position you can, and it wouldn't matter because they're flat. So yeah, it's weird. The other things, the colors of the people. Some of the people are green. This lady right over here is green. We have a yellow person over here. These people are kind of like a pinkish lavender color. We have an orange person over here. So Matisse uses very bright colors, and he paints, and also these are bright colors. These paints have diluted over time, so they're not as bright as they were back in 1906. And the ambiguous shapes in the upper left, like you're confused about the shapes of the people right here, and I'm confused about what is going on. All of this right here, these shapes. Yes, I get that this is a tree trunk, and this is probably foliage, but which tree goes with which color? I don't get it. That's flattened. That's that flattened shape, right? He's flattened the space in here. All right, woman with a hat. I want you to know this painting. I found this picture online, and I thought it was funny because the person looking at the colorful painting has colorful hair. So here's our painting. Matisse believed that color could play an important role in conveying meaning. He was very interested in the scientific method of having a hypothesis and testing that hypothesis. So apart from color, it is a pretty typical portrait. We were just on the subject of like what's going on in this painting. I am often confused by this painting right here. So what's going on with her arm? So it looks like she is sitting in a chair and has twisted to turn around and has her arm over the back of the chair to look at the artist. But which, look at her hand. Is this her hand right here? Or is this her hand right here? Does she have a green hand or a green sleeve with an like a peach colored hand? I don't know because he's flattened that shape and I can't right or and then if she is, it just looks like she has a flipper for a hand to me. All right. We get these ambiguities in modern art that are left to our imagination of what's going on. Anyways, it's a painting of his wife. Here he is with his wife. And he's trying to capture his wife's psychology. The color tells us who she is. In the face, the pinks, the yellows, the oranges point to a passionate person, but the greens symbolize growth or envy. The blue symbolizes sadness or calm. And the background is not painted radically different from the foreground. That's another part of flattening that space. We have an orange neck with the blue behind it. Why would he paint orange right next to blue? They're complementary colors. So it shows a contrast. It makes it stand out from the background. So he's making things stand out from the background and then he's flattening it right back again. And we can see the influence from Gauguin, although Gauguin kept his face like the natural optic colors, right? And not the arbitrary color. And then we could also compare this with the Impressionism era. How it's similar paint strokes. Of these, you can see the brush strokes, but the colors are now completely bonkers. And here's another one of his paintings, another painting of his wife with a green stripe down her face. All right, this will finish us up for Fauvism. Does anybody have any questions about Fauvism? The years for Fauvism? 1906.